how we all struggle to find our voice and then to express it and to express it with confidence.
I think because I was raised in a traditional and hierarchical and male-dominated family, I still have the fear of speaking with people in public.
I think the biggest change for me is the feeling of worthiness. Am I worthy to be listened to?
We were taught to keep quiet, to be docile. It is a struggle when we want to speak up, to actually have our voice on the table.
What were some of the worst comments that you heard that was thrown at you?
I started questioning my own abilities. That was scary because the more you question, the less confident you are.
Welcome to Raw with Uma, and I'm Uma, your host and architect of Raw Leadership, here to bring you unfiltered, unrehearsed, unscripted conversations with women about what really goes on in navigating life and work. Are you ready? Let's get raw. So my guest today is dialing in from China. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you, Uma, and good morning.
Good morning. And where in China are you today?
I'm in Beijing, China.
Okay. And you and I actually know each other because we used to work for the same company, but we actually never talked to each other during that time. But very recently, we did speak with each other, so we know a little bit about each other. So why did you want to come on the show?
Yeah, actually, I have learned a lot through our previous conversations after we both have left VMware, and I gained a lot regarding how to speak up during one-on-one sessions. But I don't know how to speak comfortably in public, so that's why I would like to learn from you about speak up for myself in public, and would like to join today.
Okay, I think that's a good question. A little bit about yourself before we get into the conversation. Maybe tell everyone, where did you grow up and what is your dreams and aspirations and what are you up to now after leaving VMware?
I was born in a small city in the southeast part of China, and I was raised up by my grandparents instead of my parents. So I really love them very much, and also love to connect with people and also caring for other people. And at my childhood, my dream was to be a lawyer or a teacher. Actually, I didn't pursue the major in law or in teaching, but I studied in English literature and also applied linguistics. And then after graduation, I feel like I'm not so good at speaking with other people and don't have so high emotional intelligence. So I started to pursue a career in human resources because I think human resources can give me more opportunities to practice and also interact with people and connect with people.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So let's come to your first question.
Okay. Yeah. So recently, after learning from you regarding like asking for sponsorship, etc., I feel that I'm more courageous and also brave to speak with people and ask for people during one-on-ones. But I still have the fear of speaking with people in public. And also I think because I was raised in a traditional and hierarchical and male-dominated family, so when I entered into career and even after 13 years in my career, I still have the inner fear of speak and defend for myself in public, especially when there are senior people in front of me and male colleagues in front of me. So I would like to learn from you about how to speak for myself and voice my different perspectives publicly, confidently, and in the front of senior people and male colleagues.
Yeah, that's such a big question. And firstly, you are not alone. And I think you'll also hear from my co-host next about how we all struggle to find our voice and then to express it and to express it with confidence. And it very much also depends on the environments that we are in and if we feel safe to speak up. And at the end of the day, I think we all want to be seen and heard. So that's why I think we hesitate, in addition to, I think what you are talking about very much resonates to all of us who grew up in Asia in very traditional hierarchical families. And especially as girls, I was told that I should listen instead of speaking, right? I don't know if you had the same upbringing with your grandparents. So a lot of times I was quiet, and I grew up as an introverted child who was very quiet. And then suddenly you come into the workplace and you need to almost act like a man to succeed. You have to speak up and you have to speak with confidence and you need to be a bit aggressive, right? Especially in China. If you are not putting your voice in a certain tone and in a certain way, people might not take you seriously or even listen to you. Honestly, in the beginning for me, I was just stealing and faking. And then I think the biggest change for me is the feeling of worthiness. Am I worthy to be listened to? And that is work that I had to do on myself. Less about the environment that I was in, but for me to believe that what I have to say is important and others should listen to what I have to say. So in the beginning, I would over-prepare. So before I go into any meeting or any presentation, or even if I get on stage, the night before, days before, I would be in front of a mirror practicing. I would be thinking about what questions I'm going to ask. And because I'm an introvert, I tend to over-prepare. And that helped me. So I would just over-prepare on every meeting, every presentation, etc., until I did it enough times to be confident. And then that slowly evolved to finding my own voice. And I think it's a long journey, if I'm being honest. I mean, I'm in my 40s now. Do I still get nervous about presentations? Less. But if I'm not familiar with the topic, yeah, I am going to actually over-prepare still and practice in front of the mirror. I hate listening to my own voice and watching my own videos, but I force myself to do it so that I can listen. And at the end of the day, I think today I only care about what I think. And previously, I cared about what everybody thought. And what I've learned to do is to only care about the opinions of people that genuinely care for what's best for me. Because if they genuinely care for what's best for me, then they will do what's best for me.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm at the beginning stage of your journey, and also I'm quite introverted, and yeah, maybe to practice more and also to learn more from other people would be a good start and a fundamental part that I need to start on.
Yeah, so I have some questions for you. Have you tried speaking up in meetings
Yes,
and voice? Yeah, and what has been your experience so far?
So it depends. Like if I have a very safe and well-receiving environment, then I can courageously speak and also can better articulate my voices, and then they will be better received by other people, and then I will have more confidence to speak more and elaborate. And when the environment is not so welcoming and also I can't feel the safety that I need, then I will be more reluctant to speak. Or when I finally gathered my courage to speak, it's not so well received. So maybe it's a kind of my own projection on other people, or maybe it's because I'm not so confident enough, then it's not so well received or not taken so seriously as I hope.
What tells you that it's not well received? What reactions do you get?
Sometimes people will give no response to me but direct to another topic. And sometimes some other people will repeat what I have mentioned, and then they will give the credits to the people who mentioned it instead of mentioning my name.
Okay, so that is a classic stolen idea, which is an unconscious bias that happens to women because we constantly have to prove ourselves over and over again. The reason for that is that women are more often than not judged on our performance, what we have done, whereas men are more often than not judged on their potential, what they can be. And so when a woman speaks up and there is layers of intersectional bias, maybe you were the youngest in the room, maybe you were the only Asian, maybe you were the only person from China from a certain region, that's intersectional. Then it adds on the layers to that. So when you say something, it might be ignored or people move on as if nothing happened. And somebody else says exactly the same thing and people say, great idea. So let's talk about that. What can you do to change that? Because you are not alone, and it's also happened to me as well. So I've said things in meetings and then it goes on as if I didn't say anything. Or I've said something and then somebody else said exactly the same thing 5 minutes later, usually a man, and everybody says, great idea. So the next time that you say something and someone moves on the meeting, what I like to do is, depending on how important what you're saying is, and you have prepared it before the meeting, get somebody else in the same meeting to double your voice. So sometimes it could be your manager. If your manager knows that you are going to bring up this suggestion or idea ahead of time, sometimes it can be another woman or another man who's a colleague who's in the same meeting, who you would reach out to before the meeting and say, hey, this is one of the ideas. I might bring it up in the meeting. And if I do, I would love for you to double my voice because, like it or not, the voice of two women equals one man. So we have to find ways to double our voice. Now, assuming you can't do that, and you say something and the meeting moves on and the person changes the topic, it's really okay for you to say, I'd love to bring back the conversation to what I just brought up and would love to hear the opinions from across everyone in the room, what they think about what I just said. So you invite people to give space to comment on your comment. So it's really okay. And I think the thing to remember is always be kind and always be respectful. So you're not saying like, hey, how come you didn't listen to what I said? And you're moving on to the next topic, right? So it's like, actually, I would love to bring back the point I just mentioned and would love to hear from everyone else in the room what they think, which is a very kind and respectful thing to do. Same with if you are interrupted. Now, it seems like in your experience when not interrupted, when someone stole your idea, no one else actually said, oh, it was actually brought up by Jenny originally. So I would like to hear Jenny expand on that idea first. Now, ideally, someone in the room is going to do that for you. But if that didn't happen, it's also really okay for you to interject and say, thank you for bringing up what I raised earlier, and claim the credit back to you. Again, you are doing it with kindness and respect. You're not saying, hey, that was my idea. How come you're saying it now? You're not saying anything like that, right? So, and I think this is very scary to do. It sounds easy when I say it now, but this is how we have to claim credit for our work in the workplace and how we try to find our voice. The only way to do it is to do it. Because I think a lot of times we are waiting for confidence to come before we do it. But the reality is we have to do it, then we gain the confidence.
I see. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Uma. I like the third idea to interject and thanks the person to bringing it up. But I also feel that the third point would be a little bit frightening for me. So can you share more suggestions or advice about how to really do the third thing? Because maybe the third one is the most easiest one and the direct one.
Yeah. Yes, it is very frightening to do, especially if you are in a room where there are more senior people, especially, or people that you maybe admire, or maybe you're the only woman in the room, so you are a minority. And all those environments are very scary. Absolutely. I don't know any shortcut other than working on your own confidence and believing that what you have to say is important to the meeting. So the self-belief, actually, it starts from there. Do I believe that this idea, this question is actually going to make things better? Because if it does, then it's worth me saying it. And I don't care if I'm going to sound not so confident. I'm going to stumble on my words, but I'm going to say it. Because in the beginning, you will maybe say something like, oh, I'm not so sure, but I think, I have a question, and, you're like very nervous, and it's okay. We all started that way, right? I think the starting point is not to be so hard on yourself and to be kind to yourself and just fumble your way through it. And hopefully somebody in the room is going to lift you and say, okay, yeah, let me repeat what Jenny just said. And I think that's a good question, That's a supportive environment. But if you're not in that environment, just try anyway. That's really how I learned it. And, I'm going to be curious about what my co-host has to say around finding her voice, because she's struggled with this too. So, and she's changed environments many times. So, yeah, I think just getting yourself to do it if you feel, one, do I feel like what I have to say is important? And yes, I'm okay with imperfections. Just do it imperfectly. And don't be so hard on yourself, because I know you're going to walk out of that meeting and then you're going to be like, oh my God, I wish I said this. I wish I would have responded that way, and then we're so hard on ourselves. We're like, because we have to prove ourselves over and over again, we are constantly saying to ourselves, we're not good enough. We don't deserve to be seen and heard. And then, oh, I wish I did that. And then we beat ourselves up for the rest of the day. Like, oh, I should have done that. Should have said that.
Yeah, that's really sometimes my self-dialogue. Yeah, this can help me to be more confident by doing it.
If someone comes up to you and says, Jenny, you really shouldn't be talking in meetings because you don't have good ideas. Let's say worst case scenario, right? Someone says that to you. I always think of worst case scenarios. Then that person obviously doesn't care about your success. Then that's one less person for you to care about and give time and energy to. a good person who cares about your success is going to come up to you and say, hey, Jenny, well done. For the first time, you spoke up in that meeting. Can I give you some ideas? And those are the people you want around you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, maybe I needed to do something and start something from myself first. Then I can attract such supportive people.
Yeah, because they all started that way, Jenny. They may not tell you the story, but they all started that way.
Yes, and thank you for sharing the worst case. It's really very inspiring and empowering. And I don't need to care about those people anymore. Thanks a lot for sharing.
Yeah. Do you have another question?
Yes, I'm also thinking like when we are climbing up the career ladder as women and we have experienced some of the not so supportive environment ourselves, then as women leaders, how can we create an environment that can support junior women and also junior people to voice out their opinions and make the workplace more diverse and make sure that everybody, no matter who and when and where, they will be seen, heard, and valued?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think every woman in this world who is in the workplace or outside has a responsibility to send the elevator down to other women so that they are not trying to figure out what tools they need to climb up that mountain. They're going to get in the elevator and get there much faster than we did. And I think there's so much work needed for women to lift other women instead of competing with them. So I love your question for that reason. Let's use the example we just talked about. So if you are the more senior person in that room and a young woman is trying to ask a question or has an idea, then you would then give that inclusive environment for her to step into. So you would say, for example, let's say there's hypothetically a person called Sarah, and she's much younger. She's in the meeting with you. So, and you see like she's struggling and, wants to ask a question, and you would give her the time and space to say, actually, everybody, let's pause because I think Sarah has a question to ask. And what I find useful is always give a heads up to the person before you ask them to speak so that they have time to think before they're asked to speak. So if it's a virtual meeting, you could send a private message to Sarah and say, Sarah, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to bring up your name to invite you to ask a question about this topic. So she has 5 minutes to think before she asks the question. She has a heads up. Sometimes people are very surprised that somebody called your name and then you're expected to speak. Very hard to do, right? Especially if you're already nervous. So find a way to give a heads up. If you are in a live meeting and it's a physical meeting, you could say something like, oh, this topic is really important. And I know that Sarah will have something to contribute, but let's come back to that later and move on to the next thing. And then make sure you then bring that up again. Sarah, I want to bring us back to the conversation. So she had time to think about it. So you create the environment for her to speak up and then, give her the feedback. And if you find that she's interrupted in a meeting, women are more likely to be interrupted up to 7 times more in a meeting by men, especially. Then let's say Sarah said something and a man interrupted her. You could step in and say, actually, I would like to hear Sarah finish her thoughts. So it's still kind, it's still respectful. You're not saying like, hey, be quiet because you interrupted her. You're just saying, hey, I would like to hear Sarah finish her question or finish her sentence. And then you send a message to everybody in the meeting not to interrupt anybody else by doing that. So it starts with you also still having the confidence to step in and say something for another woman. And the third thing you can do is to double her voice. So if she has an idea or she has a question that's interesting, as long as you agree with it, you could say, yes, I agree with Sarah, and I think that is a great point because, or that is a great question from Sarah. I have the same question, and then say something. So you're doubling her voice. Yeah, those are 3 things I think we can do. And I think it's about the everyday thing that we can all do to make our environments more inclusive versus big policies, etc. Because it's the everyday thing that moves the needle.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I also believe that the everything is the most powerful thing for us to build up the inclusive environment. And also the 3 tips are very important and helpful. And also it reminded me the sentence that to be the manager you wanted to have when you were young. It's really very powerful. Thank you for sharing, Uma.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all the questions you're asking is happening every day to every woman around the world. So thank you for asking these questions. It might seem small, but it's happening to everyone. And not just women, I think any underrepresented minority. So I hope a lot of people are going to gain from this conversation knowing that, number 1, they're not alone, and number 2, they can do something about it.
Thank you so much, Uma. This is very inspiring, and it's great to know that I'm not alone, and also I can do something daily to change myself and also create a better environment and a world for other people as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, and speaking of not alone, I'm going to invite my co-host, and you're going to hear her story about how she found her voice and all of the same challenges that you navigated as well.
Thank you so much, and looking forward to her coming.
My co-host today is Lynette Lee. She is the founder and CEO that focuses on driving initiatives and startups in sustainability, so the ESG space, within the fintech innovation industry. She believes in constructive engagement to support stronger performance to achieve positive and enduring outcomes in the ESG ecosystem to create cradle-to-cradle sustainability strategies for businesses of all sizes. As a woman in business in the small and medium enterprise space and a global corporate environment, she appreciates the different size of challenges from her roles as a business owner and then as a corporate venture builder. I first met Lynette in Hong Kong in 2009, which was the start of a 15-year friendship. Lynette strongly believes in paying it forward and sits on the board of a charity with 70 years of history, which supports women and is also an official mentor for the Singapore Management University and here in Singapore, the Rafflesians Business Network. So Lynette, great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Uma. Actually, I didn't count. I didn't realize that we knew each other for 15 years. But
I know, I counted it last night when I was like,
wow.
2009.
1.5 decades, actually.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I know. Crazy, right?
Yeah, and the changes that we both have went through over the last 15 years from careers in life and positions as females in different roles as... Wow.
Yes, we've evolved and we're still evolving.
Yes, and I'm glad we're still friends over 15 years.
Yes,
lovely.
I'm very grateful for that.
So am I.
So you've heard my conversation with Jenny. Now I know you want to say hello to Jenny in Mandarin.
Yes.
And maybe say a few words about what you thought about her conversation in Mandarin.
Okay, sure. So I will start in Mandarin here, not to ignore you or anything.
没问题，我可以讲华语一点点。
哇，超棒哎！对你刚才你讲的故事呢，我在想，哇，你讲的每一句话都是我经历过的一个过程。然后我觉得是说，我们其实很多女人都不 不谈这些事情，因为我们只在心里想我们在做什么，然后就默默的就走开，然后让别人拿到我们的成就，我们的想法，就是这样一生过去了。所以有这个节目，还有我们互相的那交谈呢，其实是真的帮助我们自己的成长，真的帮助我们很多。谢谢你。
Yeah. Okay, so for the audience that don't speak Mandarin, maybe tell them what you just said to Jenny.
Okay, sure. So I was just sharing with her that what she was asking resonated so much with me. And it was just amazing because a lot of times as typical Asian upbringing Chinese girls, we were taught to keep quiet, to be docile. And it is a struggle when we want to speak up.
Yeah.
To actually have a voice on the table, especially when you're junior, when you're starting, it gets even harder and no one's championing it. So with her sharing and you giving us the tips on how to manage it, it was really inspiring because it's that open exchange that allows growth for all of us and to evolve in this journey and take the credit. So it's really very powerful from these conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you grew up here in Singapore.
Yes, I did.
And in a somewhat of a mixed heritage family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I call it the rojak of Singapore, which is a mixed vegetable dish.
Yeah, tell us more.
So I have a bloodline that consists of Peranakan, partially Italian, third generation, and Chinese Teochew. It was a very interesting family that I grew up in because I get the Western influence. I get the very, very Asian Chinese influence itself. And I get perspectives from different ways. So it was trying to change roles. As a child, it can be a bit deceitful. Like you're trying to manage the adults, which is like your stakeholders, and monitoring your own behavior all the time. What would be surprising, my mom was educated. So of that generation, some of the women actually didn't go to school. But really interesting, she was educated in a Western format. She did all the way to university, but she still held that Chinese Asian concept of girls. So just to share, I remembered I did well in Singapore, we have the primary 6 leaving exam, PSLE. I was actually able to get into the gifted stream and to one of the top schools. She said, girls don't need to be so smart, and asked me to go to a neighborhood school that is more convenient, right? Being the stubborn child, that's where the Western influence came in. I went to amend the application and went to the school that I wanted.
Yeah.
But it was that mindset that you don't need to excel. Just, let's make it convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting upbringing that way.
Yeah. So that rebellious little streak reminds me of how I've known you for the last 15 years. And one of the questions I have for you is, you had your own business in interior design, and then you completely switched and went into a corporate world, which was, for a lot of people, daunting. And you stepped into an environment where you had no performance. Talked about women being judged on performance. You had no performance to speak for or to show. So you were really starting on a blank piece of paper. What was it like to walk into meeting rooms, conference calls in the beginning as you started in the financial industry, and then you did another swap into ESG? So stepping into those new environments, what were some of the worst comments that you heard that was thrown at you? And you are a little bit more ahead than Jenny. So more matured, more experienced in life. And I just want to demonstrate, because we still, no matter how advanced we might be or seem to be in terms of age and experience and working experience as well, we still face these kinds of biases. What are some of the worst things when you first stepped into those environments?
It was like jumping off the cliff, effectively. I said, if I was going to learn about the corporate environment, it's either sink or swim, right? And let's figure out what's going to happen. And it's interesting you brought up that I didn't have a history beforehand when I go in, because I never thought of it that way. So maybe sometimes not thinking about it helps. But what was interesting is in the private sector where I was running my own business, I was doing well for like 20 years before I sold it. I never thought much about biasness. Because I was helming the seat, I was working with people. The whole outcome from SME was just to get the job done and get it completed. So when I went to the corporate environment, to me, I brought that same mindset. I can deliver. I need to learn certain skill sets. I need to talk in the corporate jargon itself, right? Which is something I never needed to do. It was a struggle from learning how to do presentations in the way they wanted to understanding. So the very first corporate job I went into was in business development, and it was in a Chinese conglomerate itself. It was a struggle because the mindset and how they talk to people is quite different. And it was even more different for me because I didn't have a corporate to compare with. I only had my experience in the private sector in the business that I was running to compare with. What was most daunting to me one day about attitude? And like I said, at that point, I didn't understand what is unconscious bias or anything. A guy actually put up to me, so one of the very senior guys, I was walking towards him, wanting to approach him to ask him about something. He put up his hand and said, "Don't come." Yep. I was like, in my past life, I would just be like, "I'll talk to you later," or get something, right? And we don't have that kind of behavior. Honestly, in where I was running my own business, I don't have that kind of behavior.
You mean like, don't walk towards me?
Yeah, don't. Literally, it was like, don't. I was like, wow. I mean, even your own parents don't do it to you, right? And I was like trying to gauge because I was in shock. Like, wow, I won't do it to anyone because it's very disrespectful. But I couldn't register because I don't have a baseline to compare that behavior, right? So I walked away because as much as I seem extroverted, deep down, because I'm actually introvert. I'm an ITJ. I think we shared that before, right? And I was trying to think, what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to react? Yeah. And it's actually extremely, I mean, I can understand maybe you're busy, but I was like, dude, what am I supposed to manage? How am I supposed to manage this here professionally? So it was a learning curve. I actually went back to my space. I sat down and I thought about it. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to voice up. I didn't have a community because everyone that I knew, most of the people that I knew was from like when I was doing their places. It's the people I work with, right? So I was actually mulling over it for quite a while, in fact. I think only one day I realized that it was eating into me. I was actually questioning about how I was doing my work. I started questioning my own abilities. And that was scary because the more you question, the less confident you are. And that was when the unsafe space was created. I learned to keep quiet instead of voicing out every opinion that I have. So what I silently sit behind, like what Jenny was saying, my ideas are stolen. Because the more quiet I kept, everyone just took credit for it. And there was no one in the room to champion for me because I didn't know what to do. That was really one of the darkest moments of my life. I was very blessed that there was one lady who told me, she was quite senior at McKinsey at that point, and she said, Nat, you just look in the mirror every morning and said, you did 20 years of it on your own. Without VC support, without anything. You were generating revenue to the point you could buy X whatever itself, right? So why are you questioning yourself? And just say that you can do it. And I did that for like a month. It looks very stupid. I was like brushing my teeth and doing it. But it helped. It really helped, like for me to restructure how I was doing. And with that, I spoke up. I think I reached out to you too. I reached out to many people that had very strong corporate experiences to teach me how to manage it and also to look into my own behavior, my own thoughts that was from childhood and how to actually cope with it.
Yeah. And I think the story you just shared for a lot of people that are listening out there, especially women, when something as shocking as that happens to us, although that's the first time that I've heard such a story, the first thing that happens to us is, oh my God, what did I do? Right? And then we spiral into this hole, and it gets deeper and deeper because we think we are the ones that perpetuated that reaction. So for anyone listening, if you have had or found yourself in a situation where, you're first asking yourself, is this really happening to me right now? And then second, what did I do? You are not alone, because this is what every woman thinks, and even in the worst of situations, and I'm talking microaggression, sexism, sexual harassment. So that, is a form of harassment because it made you uncomfortable. Did you ever had the opportunity to go back and have a conversation with that person?
No, I did not. Yeah, I wasn't ready at that point. But even anything right now, if say, that was years ago, right? I would. Yeah, I would actually go back and said I was not comfortable and that was not right. Yeah, I am actually subconsciously trying not to say the word not nice because, but it's actually not right. It's not about being nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So would you have just kept walking and told him at that moment, or do you think you would have found him at another time to bring that up?
At another time. I think it's about the right time and to speak like what you said earlier on with kindness and with respect, and take it out of a personal context to convey what you were uncomfortable with, not to criticize the other person's behavior, because it's really not, we are not mothers, although we love to be and being female and all, but it's up to that person to decide on their own behavior. It's for us to let them know, but not for us to judge.
Yes. And did anyone else see that happen?
Probably a couple of people, because it's an open office kind of setup. Yeah, but nobody spoke a word about it either. Yeah.
And I think this is where I talk about, I think we all have three options. When we find ourselves in that situation where we are witnessing something like that happening to somebody else, even something as small as what Jenny talked about in terms of her idea being stolen, there were other people in that meeting, but they didn't say anything. Probably a couple of people saw this and didn't say anything as well. So they are bystanders, right? So you can choose to be a bystander. And so your attitude is, this has got nothing to do with me. I'm just going to stay here in my space. I'm not going to say anything. Nothing to do with me. Or you could be a colluder. You could pour oil to fire and make it worse, right? So someone may have come up to you and done the same reaction, watching this person do it to you, because that makes it okay for other people to do that to you, right? Because nobody said anything. So they make it worse for you. So in a meeting, in Jenny's context, let's say, somebody else stole her idea, and then another person making it worse could be like, yeah, great idea. I want to hear you say more about it, instead of bringing it back to Jenny, making it worse. So that's a colluder. And what we all want to be is a challenger, right? To step in to say something. Because when we don't, we're sending a message that it's okay. And actually what I've learned is that 9 out of 10 times in the people that I've stepped in to say something, they're actually unaware. That's why the kindness and respect matters, and no judgment matters. They're actually unaware. It's just something reflex that comes up to them. Maybe they grew up doing that. Maybe in their house they do that. Who knows? Who knows the context? That's why it's good not to judge. But they actually go, oh my God, like, did I do? And then no one ever said anything. And then you bring it up to them and they go, oh my God. Like, I remember one guy said to me, oh my God, I've been such an ASSHOLE. Because he really didn't realize, because no one ever said anything.
That's true. I love how you've actually put a term to it, the colluder and the challenger. So share a little bit. years passed. So I'm in a more senior position itself. I have a voice, and of course there are daily struggles because I run like a startup in a large corporate environment and all. So everybody has very short fuse because there's so much to do in a day. It was interesting because not too long ago something happened. There was a guy who actually spoke up to me. So he's actually reporting to me instead, right? And it's the way that he said it. It was fairly disrespectful and it was loud. So I felt that, like the point you mentioned, maybe he's not aware. I'm not 100% about not aware because it's such an inflated ego and there's the lack of understanding about how you actually treat other people in a certain way. It was awful because it was loud and a few people actually heard. And I was thinking, should I react or should I just hold back for a while, right? Because like what you said, if I don't respond, what happened is undermining my own voice, and it will create more problems for me later on at work because there's a lack of respect and all that happens. But if I react right now, I know that I'm upset. It's very hard. I know at that point it was very hard for me to be kind, actually. It was very tough, right? So I kept quiet, and I think I said that, hey, I'd like to have a word with you later. But because of that reaction was so wide, and that's when I really appreciate when there was challenges. Somebody else brought up to HR boss. Wow. Yeah. And somebody had a conversation because I could see that 360 degrees change about a week plus later. I'm not going to question whether it's sincere or insincere, but the fact was that there's a change did make my life. Somebody said something, very grateful for that. That's one. And it was a guy, actually. It wasn't a girl. That I was very grateful for that. And I'm glad that it got a little bit easier because he's more mindful of the behavior. I still think that it's no excuse to behave in such a manner, and which is why I strongly support your cause about unconscious bias. I give you the benefit of a doubt that you might not be aware of it, but that kind of behavior is disruptive at the workplace, and it doesn't add value.
Yeah. And like you say, sometimes it's conscious bias, or just consciously vicious, or someone wanted to intentionally hurt you in that context, right? So that's also very possible. But yeah, starting with benefit of doubt is always good. So in the two major swaps that you did, you know, from interior design, going into the corporate finance world, and then moving into ESG and building a startup from scratch in a very large corporate environment, what have you learned about speaking up, about getting your ideas across, even when you feel like you're throwing yourself off the cliff, maybe, and making sure that your ideas are not stolen anymore?
I learned that I need to prepare a lot beforehand. So we do things like pitches very, very often. I actually put it down and make a lot of conscious effort to, like what you said, memorize it. Besides using the mirror, I actually record myself multiple times, rehearse it. And because it reaches a point when you're so comfortable with it, you're able to deliver it very confidently. And like what you shared, which earlier on, like beginning is a bit of a faking it. Like, why do I need to do this? I never needed to pitch in that manner before. It was really a big learning curve. And then I just kept doing it. And initially, like what was said, it was watching countless videos of other people doing it, success cases, and then learning how they do it. And slowly, I added in my own personality, what I really think about, and be very comfortable about adding it in to showcase what I really think about it. It took a while. I must say it really took a long time to do so because you have to articulate it in the language that various stakeholders are looking at. But it was all about practice, hard work, listening to multiple podcasts, watching a lot of YouTubes, a lot of programs, reading. I mean, you've been my place. You've seen the number of books I have. And that helped me to put my voice on the table. I think the second part was there were certain champions that asked questions in such a way that they led me to be very comfortable in sharing what I wanted to say. I believe in many conversations, if I didn't have this, like what you shared, sponsors, I would have just clamped up and shrunk back into the past way that I've managed it. Now is that it doesn't matter even if no idea is a bad idea. So this is what I firmly believe in now, and I believe it from my core, from my DNA. So I would actually throw out an idea that might sound silly because it could develop into something that's fantastic. And I give myself and love myself a little bit more to allow myself to voice up in such a manner. And there's no arrogance in it. I'm like, let's talk about it. And I'd like to hear your feedback about this and how can we develop it further, because that's where innovation and creativity starts. It was tough because I have to pull back and cringe when I'm like, what are you thinking about, right? Many times I cringe. But over a period of time, I learned to not cringe and think like, hey, it could be so bad that it becomes good because you need to go to the extreme end. And I'll just voice out now. It's not, some people's opinions doesn't matter, like what you said. Some people, I cut out quite a lot of people in my life. And only the ones that I want in my life that really means well and I like them to be in my life for a long time really matters. Their opinion matters. The rest doesn't really matter because they don't even remember who I am maybe 10 years from now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love Jenny's question about what we're all doing to help other women to find their voices and to create inclusive environments where they can thrive, especially when we've had to do the hard hike. How do we send the elevator down, right? What might be one thing, if you say to anyone listening out there, on helping somebody new coming to the organization, somebody who's been in your position before and trying to find their space, walking into that first meeting, meeting new people, or coming into a new team, what would your advice be to them to create that inclusive environment?
What I do usually is to say a warm welcome to the team. It's not just to me itself. You'll be to the team. And I've always insisted on one thing where the calendars are opened for the team to actually slot time. One of the things I do is when a new person comes on board, I like to arrange a one-to-one session where we talk about more personal stuff so I could understand where you're coming from and why you're thinking that way and what I can do to help. So I find that generally builds a bit of trust. Because without trust, we can't build a safe space. And without a safe space, you can't actually build a good team to do the work that you want to do too.
Yeah. And I think that is the biggest gift that you can give is your time. It's something I benefited from when I joined VMware, where Jenny and I used to work. My boss was Duncan Hewitt. And anyone that joins him, he gives 100 hours of his time for the first 6 months. And I remember when I joined, I was like, wow, like 100 hours? Like, where are you going to find that? And then I thought, oh my God, 100 is not enough, but I actually never ended up using all of it. So I asked him for an extension. But that was, for me, the biggest gift he gave me. So I love what you just said about, just giving time to the people who are coming in and then really understanding them as a human versus the job that you are here to do, because that essentially allows them to be seen, be heard, and know that you've got their back, and hopefully that gives them the space to show up.
Yep. I hope it works all these years, and I would still like to carry on the same way that I manage the people that I work with itself and the newcomers that comes to the team, for sure. Because I was on the receiving end of that too with some folks where they gave me the time. You're one of those, and some of my interestingly old clients, which are very, very senior in large multinational corps, I view them as clients initially, but they gave me the time over the years when we maintained that sincere relationship and helped me a lot along the way to guide me too. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynette. It was great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a great platform, and I learned a lot too today from Jenny and from you.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to a new episode all the way to the end. And for that, I thank you for the generosity of your time. To wrap up, here are a few points from this episode. We talked about finding your voice, claiming your space in today's conversation. You heard from Jenny and Lynette about how they've been on a journey as a woman in the workplace in figuring out how they can get their ideas and questions to be heard, to be taken seriously. And we talked about a few things today as I'm going to take away some top tips. For example, practice before you start and think about doing it before you gain your confidence. I think a lot of people wait for confidence to happen before they do something, but you got to start somewhere, and imperfection is very welcomed. And think about the people that you're going to surround yourself with that's really going to support you on this journey, that truly cares about your success, and build a tribe with them. And when it comes to unconscious bias, we all have choices that we can make. So I hope you're choosing to be a challenger. What else did you take away from this conversation? I'd love to hear what you think. So please follow, like, and leave a comment. And I promise to read all of them. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, check out the link to send in your details. See you soon.